Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is
There
it
you go.
working? Yes? Okay. Wonderful. So thanks so much for coming today, and I wanted to share with everyone what the Washington Business Alliance is doing. We really appreciate that PABA has continued to be a member of the Washington Business Alliance. So I'm going to jump right into the meat of the matter. I think you all have seen this slide before. What we do in an overall umbrella fashion is we create a plan for the state. The state does not have a strategic plan. It's very data intensive. We have researchers that research these topics, and it's very nonpartisan. We do all we can to ensure it is very nonpartisan so we can work with both sides of the aisle in the legislature. And we only focus on state of Washington issues, not federal, not local. So, and we're looking for prosperity for every Washingtonian. So go ahead and next. All right. My slide's not displaying correctly, but anyway,
again,
I won't. A little background, we were formed by a really left-leaning individual and a very right-leaning individual that came from business and thought that we should be able to do a lot better in our state. So they formed this 501c3, and we also have a 501c4, but most of our work resides in the 501c3 arena. So let me go ahead and talk to you about what we were able to achieve in 2017. We brought together 34 organizations, and we successfully advocated for, with all those different organizations, lobbyists and our own, for $510 million of new funding over 4 years for school districts within that McAleer fix. That when we started, the folks in power said, no, we are not, we don't have money or time for CTE. CTE is vocational training, and all these organizations from labor unions to trade associations, etc., felt it was critical for our high schools to also be focusing on vocational education. Right today in ERDC is the Education Resource and Data Center, published a report from kids going from 2004 to 2014, and they found that only 31% had received any type of certification or AA degree or bachelor's degree by the time they were 24 years old. So that meant 69% were not accomplishing or finishing any of those programs. So we obviously need to fix that, and there has been much improvement since 2014 till today, but it shows you where we're starting. And it's a spectrum across the state. Some areas, like I know at Peninsula College, they have a much higher graduation rate for their AA degrees, but we're looking at the kids that graduated from high school. So we felt it was critical to have this vocational training for these kids that are not going on to post-secondary education to have an opportunity to learn a different kind of skill that would help them in their career. And what we found, think about this logically, that if a child can't afford to go to college, what are they going to do? They're going to stay at home. They're not going to have money to go off to a new city and just get a minimum wage job in another location. They're going to stay with the people and the places they know. So what that really means is the CTE programs in our high schools really should be preparing those kids for skills that are needed in their own communities. So what does that mean? That means people in this room need to be making sure that you're connecting with the principals, the CTE directors, and the CTE educators in Sequim, Port Angeles, Forks High School, etc. We got 5 school districts in our county with 5 high schools, to make sure that they know what what skill sets are really needed. And so we're actively trying to make that connection. We've been working with the EDC and the chambers to try to get them to inform the CTE directors of what kind of skills are needed. So the other thing we worked on was monitoring all these different carbon tax proposals. There were 4 bills last year, and now the governor has a new one out. And here's an example. We've been going around the state now since we got this legislation passed where CTE is now part of basic education, which we were behind that. So it now must always be fully funded. So we're really excited about that success that we achieved. But here's an example. We're with, now I've lost it, the senator there, he was the head of the Ways and Means Committee last year.
John Braun.
John Braun, thank you very much, Danielle. John Braun and some folks from OSPI and Trade Association for CTE Educators talking about what the importance of this in connecting business to these educators. So we've done that in 4 communities now. So next. So what is our major focus in 2018? We created through years of work a multi-pronged approach to address state barriers that harm rural economies. So we've seen over and over again that the approach that many take is don't tax, stop taxing rural and more broadband and more money for rural. Now that's the same old record that's been playing, and we haven't seen a lot of progress. So what we decided to do is do a much deeper dive into some of these issues, and we found, so the goals for this is without spending new tax dollars, reallocate state resources to areas where they are needed most. So, as we all know, the I-5 corridor, the economy there is thriving. And it's a community, our state is the haves and the have-nots. And there are a lot of different communities like Rainier Beach in Seattle that are not thriving. There's high unemployment rate there. But, generally speaking, rural communities are not thriving, especially in comparison to what's going on in the I-5 corridor. So we've identified a lot of issues there, and I'll go through those. And we want to modify state statute to ensure agencies provide an even playing field for small communities and businesses to thrive. So those are the 2 high-level goals. And if you'll go on to the next slide. So we've got 10 approaches. Oh, and I want to say, if any of you guys have any questions or comments during this, please feel free to stop me. So the first one is allow cities, counties, or ports to access public data about industry DOR records while assuring confidential tax records are not released. That's something that Jim Jones has talked about at length and has been very frustrated with the Department of Revenue. I don't know if, when the sewer study was being done for Carlsberg, there was no information. No one could gather information without going door to door to door. How many employees do you have? And counting the number of businesses and asking information about revenues. There was no way for our community to find out by NAICS code, not by individual business, but rather by NAICS code, so North American Industry Classification System, how much money was being generated in revenues, and thus how much revenue was being generated in taxes, and how many employees were engaged in that industry. So, we've talked about here in our own community, tourism is very important, and forestry is very important. But when I remember when I ran for commissioner in 2013, my opponent said, well, only 2% of the jobs are forestry related in our county. Well, that's because he was looking at one line of the North American Industry Classification Code, which the Employment Security Department publishes, and that's at 2% between ag and forestry. But what happens is you go a little deeper. Well, he wasn't counting any employees at mills, and he wasn't counting any employees that are driving or people that are driving trucks. So Employment Security Department has been much more supportive of providing information, and understand this information is provided where you cannot know what that company is if they give it to a local community. And why the system is so unfair right now is that Department of Revenue, if you have your own B&O tax, a separate tax as a city, or if you have your own business license fee as a city or a county, then you get to have DOR's data. They will give that to you. However, if you don't have those, they say you don't have a need to know. Well, the county commissioners, the port commissioners wrote a letter to our legislative delegation. They then sent something to Department of Revenue, and they are saying, okay, we'll allow counties to have that data if they'd like, and cities, but that's not, of course, what the staff told us. But we won't let ports have any of that data. And because our county, and again, we wouldn't receive data about any one individual company. It would be, we'd know number of companies, number of employees per industry classification code, and only one employee at the port or the county would have access to all that the data. But then they could aggregate it and answer questions that Kevin may have, or that Bob may have, or that the port may have, and could produce reports about, hey, here in tourism, this is how many companies there are, here's how many employees there are, here's the total revenue. And keep in mind that across our state, 25% of all of the working force in our state are sole proprietors. So they don't have any employees. They're not counted by Employment Security Department. So it's really, it's such valuable information, and we will stop wasting our time arguing about what's reality in our counties. And we will also be able to not have to spend so much money on grants, or I'm sorry, contractors. When the port goes after a grant or is trying to assess how many maritime businesses are there, and how, we have to pay $60,000 or $40,000 for a study. And this way, we'd have one employee in the county or at the port that would be able to, do an interlocal agreement and give information to the city of PA. What information would you like? Contribute some money to this person's salary, and then, anyway, as you can tell, there's a lot of technical, detailed information here, but it's big cities, Seattle, Tacoma, they have this. They have all this data. We don't. That's not, that's an issue that needs to be resolved because Department of Revenue doesn't want to give it to us. That needs to change. So the next, any questions there? The next one is empower local government bodies to use location in qualification criteria when selecting a professional service contractor. So, and that's defined as a engineer, architect, landscape architects, and land surveyors. So in state statute, it doesn't specifically say that you can consider location. So what happens is very often, and I've seen this at our port as well, and this has just been historical, that if a CH2M, an engineering firm with 27,000 employees, responds to a request for qualification for an engineering job or an architectural job, they're always the most qualified. They always are. Zenobit couldn't beat them out. Because, so what happens is we end up exporting so many of our local public dollars to Seattle and Tacoma companies. And that makes me mad. So, that is something, and by the way, these 10 items we've been working with Senator Chase, who runs now the Trade and Economic Development Committee, and she's putting a bunch of bills together on some of these issues. A lot won't get passed in 2018 because everyone's focused on Hearst's decision and other things, but it probably, it often takes several years to get something rolling, so the expectation is 2019. So the other is RFPs are for public works contracts. So clarify state statute in regards to preferential hiring to support local economies and public works contracts. So, you know, you always hear, oh, well, you can't, it's got to be the lowest bid. Well, it's interesting that the City of Seattle, the City of Tacoma, King County, and the Port of Seattle all have preferential hiring policies. When I've talked to the Association of General Contractors that represent the big boys, they say, oh, well, but that's illegal. Well, they've done it, and they've been doing it for years. And what they do is they say, if a contractor is from a zip code that's an economically distressed zip code, then we give them preferential treatment. So, but we all believe, and I've talked to a lot of the attorneys and our staff, and they get training courses, you can't do that. That's against the law. And yet, Seattle, Tacoma, King County, and Port of Seattle all have them. So, and I understand why. The reason is we don't have the huge dollars and war chest to be able to fight off a challenge or a lawsuit. And so we stay within the straight and narrow, and do make the decisions where we know we won't be getting in trouble. So, but there needs to be clarification on that. So on these two items here, and I guess this is another success of the Washington Business Alliance, is we successfully advocated for $250,000 going into the operational budget for this last year for a study to look at how many, how much export of these public dollars, your taxpayer dollars, city tax, the sales tax, the property taxes, etc., are being exported out, and what is that economic impact to our communities. And so that was included in the operational budget. Initially it was going to be in the capital budget, but Representative Theringer said, I think you're better off not having it in the capital budget. Let's put it in the operational budget. And it was so easy to get passed because so many legislators had previously been city council members or county commissioners, and they saw this happening all the time, and it ticked them off. And why, isn't there something we can do? There are some models around in different states that say you can have a local preference for awarding a contract to a local company if that local company will match the lowest bid that came in, and their bid was within 5-10% of the lowest bid. So that way you're not increasing local government expenditures. You're keeping that as low as possible, but you're also keeping some of that money locally. So two things about that. One is our team is, we have part of our team to do this study. We've selected 5 counties, one of which is Colleen County. And so we're working with our EDCs, and so Colleen County EDC, Bob Schroeder, is one of our partners. And Dr. Dan Underwood is our economist. If you know him, he's local. And then some contracting experts, Association of General Contractors, BIAW, etc. We're all a team coming together for our proposal. So that's where I'm going at 820 is to Olympia. We're in the top 2 to present our proposal to Department of Commerce. And I feel pretty good about that. I think we should win. There was another issue about that, and I can't remember now. So anyway, those are kind of interrelated. It's about state law where, constantly we are awarding contracts, whether it be school districts or ports or libraries or fire districts. Think about the PUD building, all these contractors come to our communities and get all these contracts, and why isn't that our local contractors are not competing? And if they are, and there's a whole laundry list of what those barriers are, and so part of this is to advocate for some training from Department of Commerce to these different contractors in rural areas so that they know what the process is. But it's also to streamline some of these state statutes. It's crazy how different they all are. I mean, literally, the Municipal Research and Service Corporation has a computer program that if you are smaller than this city, then it's this, and I'm sure Nathan could tell you about how. And every one of them is different, from, again, libraries to sewer and water districts to PUDs to ports to cities to counties. It's all different. And so essentially you have to have an attorney on staff, be large enough to have an attorney on staff to be able to respond to one of these things. And then you become like an expert in that type of contracting. And then you go all across the state, and typically, you know, you're the big company from Seattle, Tacoma, Vancouver, even Portland. So, yeah, we've had several contractors that are from Oregon come up and get our contracts, which, again, really ticks me off. So, I've now asked the port staff to always list where, when we talk about awarding a contract, where's that headquarters located? Where's that company from? So, a little more, you know, I'd love to see, and often it's the largest contracts in our county are typically what the government is doing. And yet, we're not keeping any of that money here. Yes, sir.
Is it possible to encourage consortia in awarding contracts?
Absolutely. And so, something else we discovered during this research is that, so there's a company called Dodge Analytics that does public records requests, and they do it every month to counties mostly, road departments, but also building. And they get all the data on who bid what, and so how much did they bid on concrete? How much was their bid on mobilization? How much was their, and so this company called Dodge Analytics has all of this data, and they have a database, and the big companies all subscribe to this database. There's not one company in Clallam that subscribes to that database. And so when Brook and Brook, or you know, some of these Hope Construction responds to an RFP, their competitors know exactly what they bid last time. And so it's an unfair advantage. And I've been talking to North Peninsula Building NPBA, talking to them about, hey, what if you guys did a subscription to this database and then share that with your members? You know, it's really not that much money. I don't know if it's based on licenses, but we need to be doing some things like that. And they also have programs which aren't happening here as far as I know, where, okay, if I'm going to do a big bid on the city's next project, what's your next big project, Nathan?
10th Street.
10th Street, okay. I decide I'm a contractor, I'm going to respond to that. And I would like, I have a need for different subcontractors. I can post it, and there is a system that does that, and it's escaping me right now what it's called. But Builders Exchange, that's what it is, where you can go on there and you can say, this is what my subcontract bid would be, and then that general contractor doesn't have to run around and say, hey, this is the project, here's all the specs, will you give me a bid for this? And then the next guy, will you, it's all, you know, in the cloud. And so we need to bring that here. And again, that's something that we hope will come out of this study, one of the suggestions that will come out of this study. So, and recommendations, and have Department of Commerce be training rural communities about this. Oh, and I want to go back. I should have said at the beginning, we're in a unique time right now because suddenly rural communities not thriving is the sexy topic in Olympia. You know, after Hearst is done, after the capital budget, everybody wants to do something about it because the holding on to the House and Senate is so close, and what the Republicans want to get back some seats in rural communities, and in Grace Harbor, the House lost a seat, and so they're really worried about losing more. So they want to show that they are supporting rural communities. So we need to take advantage of this opportunity and get some of these things addressed now. Let's see, so again, any questions on that? And can you give me a time check? I'll speed it up.
It is 7:57.
Okay, thank you. So at 8:10, give me the stop sign. The next one is reform EB5 Immigrant Investor Program to prevent gerrymandering in projects. So EB5, that program, is for international investors. It's typically Chinese that want their students to be able, their children to be able to attend U.S. universities. And that system has been perverted beyond belief. It's supposed to entice investment in economically distressed areas. But in our state and most states, what happens is they define economically distressed areas by however you want. So what these companies have done, especially American Life, they're one of the largest in the US and they're based out of Seattle, Henry Lehman. They put together all these different census blocks and they always string it to Rainier Beach that is very economically distressed, but then they build a hotel, a Hilton, in downtown Seattle. How is that helping economically distressed communities? It's supposed to be for, essentially rural communities and get investment dollars in rural. So, and if you invest in an urban area, the international investor has to put up $1 million, and I think they get 5 visas, up to 5 visas for their family, and that's for a 5-year period. However, if you invest in a rural community, you only have to put up $500,000. So we really want to stop this gerrymandering process and do something like what Texas does, and they define the area by just a radius around it. So you can't do this, screwing around with trying to show that you're helping an economically distressed community. Excuse me. So anyway, that's item number 4.
You ready?
So here's another one. This is another one that's ticked me off. That, there's so many state programs where they don't put the headquarters of the help right in the, they don't have enough funds to put the regional office or the actual program in every single county. So they they typically have placed the headquarters of the regional office in the most urban setting of a rural community. So here's some example workforce development councils. The Olympic Workforce Development Council that serves Kitsap County, Jefferson County, and Clallam County. Where is it located? Bremerton. And it is actually that there are 14 WDCs across the state in 39 counties, 14 WDCs. Some serve up to 9 counties. That it's really difficult to do that. But our WDC, I think I've shared this before, is the only WDC that's a subset of a county government. Every other Workforce Development Council is a separate entity that's a non-profit. So, we did some research, I think in 2016, on the Olympic WDC. We started with that one, guess why? And found that they had received $72 million over a 10-year period, and the vast majority of those funds stayed, especially with the contracts. They issue RFPs. We're staying in Kitsap County. We weren't getting much, if any, of that. So the new Workforce Development Council Executive Director, Elizabeth Court, is great. She has a whopping 2 employees, and that is, her job is find out what is needed from industry across these 3 counties and give that information to high schools and colleges, but the vast majority of focus is on colleges. So anyway, they have a board. Anyway, I could go into that, I won't. So we're suggesting that to help rural communities, there should be a long-term intent to move some of these headquarters into more rural, economically distressed areas. Next, oh no, okay, procurement technical assistance centers, that, the PTAC it's called, serves 4 counties, and ours is one of them. They're located in, again, Bremerton. And when I was looking at a company, and also when I was director of business development at the port, I was trying to connect with them so I could share that information with tenants and with entities that might want to serve the Coast Guard base. And they told me, well, no, we can't give you any information. You have to come to PTAC 101 first. And so when's the next one scheduled? Oh, that's in 3 months. Okay, so I attended that, and it was just a big sales job for Kitsap County, and why you should move to Kitsap County. And then when I did start a business with a scientist, I tried to get information from them. I said, I've attended your PTAC 101. They never responded at all. I had to go to Olympia. I worked with the SBDC, and they recommended, yeah, you're not going to get help. You need to go to Olympia. Because they say, well, we've got Kitsap Naval Station here. We've got too much work here. We don't have the funds to support you. And John Powers, who's the head of the Kitsap Economic Development Administration, was honest with me, and he said, you really need to go to Olympia and try to get your own PTAC if that's what you want, because we just don't receive the resources to support you. So that's another example. Education Services District. Luke, do you know how many there are across, I think maybe 14 or so across the state? But again, the one that serves us and lots, and guess where it's located? Bremerton. And then a lot of DSHS resources. Again, and yeah, so anyway, it's just, and I'm sure there's lots of others that I just haven't uncovered during my research and our curiosity about how things work. Okay, next. All right, so here's another one. So I know Brian Vonlander well. I respect him. I like him. He's the Director of Commerce. And their mission, which they've changed recently, was to create more jobs in Washington. They've changed it to strengthening communities and growing Washington's economy. And so there's a sentence, but then they say, we work with local governments, businesses, and civic leaders throughout the state to strengthen communities so all residents may thrive and prosper. So what I have seen, and again, these are good people at the Department of Commerce, but what I've seen is they focus on creating jobs, and guess where? Seattle. And you know, that's happening. That happens on its own. It's thriving. I would like to see them focus on where there is a need, rather than, so, you know, and the response often is, well, you know, they're not going to want to go support you. Well, you know, we have a lot to offer, and just let us tell the story and give us some time to be able to tell that story. So we are pushing for Department of Commerce to create a rural division. We've suggested this many times. They really talk about how they're supporting rural, but I've looked at their budget, and they have one person that focuses on rural. It is a it's several hundred people in Department of Commerce, and the budget specifically for rural in this last year was $250,000. One person with, you know, the additional funds to work on programs, and you know, so they want to be at international trade shows. They want to be bringing businesses into Washington. But then they always go to Seattle and Tacoma, or maybe Spokane, maybe Vancouver, but they're not coming to rural communities. So this is another item. So here's one, and I'm just trying to I'm going to move on to number 7. This one is one that we know that this is a problem, and we want everyone to be aware of it. We haven't really figured out a solution, though, to fix this. Reform the certified apprenticeship model so rural communities can participate. So it's great. Apprenticeship programs are fabulous. However, if you're going to be a certified apprentice, which that means that that program's been certified by Department of L&I. You go through this really long process that you have a certified program. You need, as an example, for an electrician, you do, it's 8,000 hours of apprenticeship, of on-the-job training, generally maybe 2,000 hours a year, which that's actually high. So, but it's 8,000 in total. It takes people 5 years, sometimes 6 years to get all that training of on-the-job training. But then you also typically have to have 10% of that in a classroom. But they only create classrooms where there's a critical mass of need. Well, guess what? There's no need, there's no, and you must be trained by a certified journeyman to be a certified apprentice. So their PUD actually has, they have 3 apprentices. There is an electrician's course that is offered in the old schoolhouse in Sequim, but there's only one person that's taking that course, that's taking the classroom coursework there, that has a job here in Clallam County and that works here in Clallam. 2
minutes.
2 minutes. Oh, I was told there was only one. Okay, so that's so everybody talks about how great apprenticeships are. The issue is that, you know, well, yeah, great, you're going to pour lots of money into apprenticeships. That's not going to help rural, because we don't have any courses out here. And when I've talked to the labor unions, they say, well, the issue is, and mind you, it's not just constructions, it's also maritime, it's lots of different areas. You have to have a critical mass. You have to have a need, and because to set up a course, you have to have at least 12 people in the course. And so where are the 12 people, apprentices, that can be trained by 12 journeymen? Yes, Danielle.
So rural communities, what's our standing with apprenticeships for, like, as an extension of the CTE programs where students can go and try out different vocations? I understand it's really difficult for those businesses, and then with minimum wages and things like that, it's really
It is
hard
a challenge.
to,
So Tacoma and Yakima school districts have great apprenticeship programs that are connected to their CTE programs. To be an apprentice, you have to have essentially been hired. He's an employer, he's going to hire me as an apprentice, and he's going to commit for these 8,000 hours that one person is going to be mentoring me until I have 2,080 hours in a year.
then they have to pay L&I and all that.
They have to pay L&I, it's very expensive, and then you also, and then I'm going to be going to that class, and so it's an incredible program, and it really does deliver strong skills that are absolutely needed in our economies. However, it's a big lift for small companies, and if it's there are about 11,000 apprentices. You can see it, you can check it all out on data.wa.gov. They've got all these different databases, and if you look at something called ARTS apprenticeship, anyway, you can do all sorts of searches and see how many apprentices are in Clallam and et cetera. And so we're mapping that out to show the state. Great, you're going to help apprenticeships, but you're helping Seattle, Tacoma, and Vancouver, and so there's about 11,000 apprentices in the state in construction trades, and 1,000 are non-union that attend the CITC Construction Industry Trade Center, and the other 10,000 are union workers. So again, you have to be a union company to be part of some of that. And then your student has to travel all the way to Seattle to take the course, and they offer them on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 3 to 5. So, it doesn't work. Okay, so next, and I'm going to skip through these. All right, thank you. So tax increment financing is something that there's debate as to whether that's allowed under our Constitution, but generally the concept is if you're trying to get a new company to expand, or an existing company to expand, or entice a company to come to your community, once they've created more revenue and more taxes for a community, then they can get up to 30% of that rebated back to them if they created this new revenue source for the state and the cities. So that's the general concept there. And so we'd like to see that, we're competing right now with for a company to come to our community, and Utah's in #1 position. And one of the big reasons is they have tax increment financing, and Utah has a $600 million annual fund to entice companies to, but they're holding all that for Amazon. They're hoping to get Amazon. So it's good timing for us. So the next is establish House and Senate rural economic committees to focus specifically on rural economic issues. I'd love to see them. It's kind of a big ask, but why not? Ask them to create a specific committee to study these things and show that it's important to them, and involve both Republicans and Democrats and legislators from rural and urban centers. So, and the last one is address the greenhouse gas emission life cycle analysis issue through legislation, not see with so many projects to move forward.
Yeah.
So you guys maybe have been talking about this one, but so let me give you an example. If you want to create a liquid natural gas facility, because liquid natural gas is more environmentally friendly than bunker fuel, and maybe there's a big company that wants to come and needs that kind of intense energy, which is often the case with composites or other, maritime companies, and so they need that really high heat to be able to do whatever manufacturing it is that they're doing. So we have seen a trend now that a application goes in, and through the SEPA process, which I would guess you guys are all familiar with, that it is these different proposals have gone nowhere, because they're saying, well, you've got to show what the greenhouse gas emissions will be overall, and has that increased, will you decrease it? But we believe you're actually going to pull more natural gas out of the ground, and you're not substituting that natural gas, so, and you can't prove to us otherwise, so therefore you are creating an environmental impact overall to the global greenhouse gas economy. And when you ship something to if you're making a product and you ship it to China or Japan, that shipping process will create greenhouse gases, and if it gets trucked at the other end, it will there. So like that's the life cycle analysis. Where does it begin and where does it end? And right now we're in an absolute standstill in our state for any kind of energy related permitting that is not renewable. And so, people are really, really frustrated about it. Right now, Port of Kalama, there's a $3 billion project that is going nowhere fast.
Pipelines for everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's our 10th one. So I'm going to blow through these 10 seconds each slide, the last one. So this is a quick analysis of the governor's new carbon tax. It's called Reducing Carbon Pollution by Moving to a Clean Energy Economy. The tax is $20 per metric ton, which equals about 20 cents per gallon, starting in July 19, and increasing by 3.5% over inflation. So if inflation's 3, it would increase by 6.5, which will raise about $800 million per year for the state. Exemptions, and I highlighted this one, it makes me mad. Aircraft fuel is exempt.
Gee, who's the lobbyist?
Alaska has really strong lobbyists in Olympia. So, and spending the money, 50% would go to clean energy transformation, 35% for water and natural resource resilience, 15% for transition assistance. And that means like people that lose their jobs because they were part of the fossil fuel industry. And priority of clean energy transformation projects, so that's that first one with 50%, will go to those that provide benefits to low-income communities of color and communities of indigenous peoples. So there's
Pledge.
That's also known as social justice. So, anyway, we have major concerns with it. We are communicating with the governor's staff and legislators and proposing amendments, et cetera. So, anyway, could go through that, but I don't want to. So next. And now we have an office in Port Angeles. We're really excited to be part of the community here, also still in Seattle and Olympia, but headquarters here in PA.
Good.
Next.
Smooth.
So we really, again, appreciate PABA's membership. It's $250 a year. And appreciate that, and I'm happy to be here, and again, excited that this year our big focus is ensuring there is equity of opportunities for all across our state. So, any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I have a question about looking towards the future. I just missed a lot of things that talk about the future of work, the future of labor. A number of us believe that the economy is changing very quickly, and in fact the future of work is uncertain. So we're collecting data about what exists now, but are we thinking about what future jobs will look like and how to train for those, rather than the very necessary part of supporting existing businesses?
Yes.
A lot of us have kind of a Darwinian perspective on the economy and especially on businesses.
I think getting the system really set well is number one, and then number two is, that would be the next step. And so I think that should be considered, and I know the clean energy movement is absolutely a part of that, and the governor is proposing 3 centers of excellence. One is for clean grid technology that would be funded through this. Another, which I was really glad to see, is a center of excellence for forestry products and fire prevention, et cetera, which I sent some things off to the NORC to say, hey, why don't you guys be the headquarters for that? Why don't you start, getting in there proposing that? So anyway, yeah, there is a lot of work into what are the jobs of the future. So I'm getting the high sign from someone over there. We got to get to Olympia.
Thank you so much for coming.